Tonight's guest is Jason. Jason, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Vic.
Good evening right back. Thank you for your time. Jason, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm a 50-year-old. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. I've got 3 kids and a bunch of grandkids and just kind of a normal guy.
A normal, nice guy.
Well, right.
Yeah. Jason, you live in an area where multiple sightings of the Poplick monster have been reported. Please expand on that for us.
All right. Well, I actually have something that my uncle told me when I was a kid. We went through there. The area is somewhere in J-Town, Kentucky, but we drove down the street where there's like a giant train track about 100 feet up. It's a trestle or something. And when I was a kid, my uncle wanted to take me back there, and he wanted to show me where he saw a sighting of what he called the Goat Man. Well, we go back there, and he said there was a mine, an old mine shaft, he said, and he showed it to me, and this was 35 years ago, I guess. And he said when they were 16, 17 years old, they went back there, and they walked pretty good ways back in the mine shaft. What he said he saw was the way he referred to it was a man with the legs of a goat or a dog, I guess. I don't know the exact name of those type of legs, but he said it had the upper body of a man. He didn't say it had horns or anything. It just said it looked like a man's upper body with the legs of a goat. And, that always, once he told me that story, I was just, incredibly intrigued about it. And, my uncle wasn't one to lie. I mean, he was in some type of special forces in the Navy for a long time. He said that he saw a man turn into some type of a werewolf when they were overseas somewhere. They had this gentleman locked up in a cage, and I don't know if he just thought he was turning into one or what. I don't know exactly what my uncle saw, but he made reference to the wolf guy turned himself into a wolf, and that was after he had, told me about the Goat Man story. And I believed both, but I don't believe in werewolves myself. I think it was probably some guy probably kind of went insane and probably acted like one. My uncle really didn't elaborate to the effect of how much he, transformed. I don't believe people could do that. In my opinion, the only way that could actually happen is if it was some type of a transformer robot or something, I think the lichens or the Dogman or whatever, I would say they're 100% real, and I'll tell you about later, but as far as turning into a werewolf, no, I don't believe you can actually do that. So I don't really know exactly what he had witnessed or what he had saw, but it was pretty terrifying.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Can you imagine what that would be like to actually see someone transform into a werewolf? If that doesn't make the hair in your butt stand up, I don't know what will.
Right. Well, what scared me more than that, I think he was saying the guy probably went from a man, and then he probably had some type of mental episode where he started acting like one. I never really asked him about the rest of it, but what scared me more than anything is seeing the Goat Man or whatever, and seeing a person that had the legs of either a goat or a dog and the body of a man, that's something, that you don't have a whole lot of witnesses of those type of sightings, or at least they don't go not as many as the Dogman. You hear a lot of the Dogman stuff, but as far as the Goat Man or the actual werewolf stuff, I'm not sold on the werewolf stuff.
It is awfully hard to believe, but in this crazy world, I guess anything is possible.
Yeah, right.
The idea has been posed that a lot of Goatman encounters were actually cases of misidentified dogmen. Ears were mistaken for horns. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd say that's possible. Pretty likely, I guess. But like I said, it also kind of makes me wonder if I believe there actually are dogmen. Apparently, it goes back pretty far in history. But I'm also kind of curious if something's not hiding behind that. Like if there could be, maybe there's some other type of beings with those type of legs. If you like the sci-fi stuff, a lot of the movies, when they depict the different types of aliens, they have those type of legs. If you were an invading army, and if you were here trying to hide yourself, hiding behind our cryptids would be a pretty smart place to hide. That scenario's probably got some type of truth to it, but I'm just a novice at this, so.
Well, you just might be right about that. That's a good theory. If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, That's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. If you had to encounter a goatman or a dogman, Jason, which one would you pick and why?
I would say, as far as like terrifying, I'd say they're both pretty interesting creatures. I'd say the goatman. I would say I'd like to know what the world they're up to, or how long they've been here, and maybe they're cryptid too. I'm not sure. And when I say cryptid, I'm saying creatures from Earth that have lived here a long, long time that maybe aren't from they just didn't arrive like last week or last year or something. I'm talking about beings that have been through all of our history, all the way to the Greeks and possibly the Atlanteans, whenever that was. But I'd say either, really. I mean, I know I've seen some type of dog man. I would like to know what the other beings are. It just makes me real curious. Like there was an episode you had where one of the dogmen told a young guy that they actually hunted these different types of insect type of being. And I'm just curious if they're the actual goatmen or if they're, some other type of being. I guess we've got a bunch of them in there. I'm not really sure.
Well, if you think about it, if dogmen are out there, which they definitely are, then why can't other things like that be out there? Makes sense.
Right.
All right, Jason, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
I had a few days off from work, so I decided I would like to drive to eastern Kentucky and find a nice place that I could stay for 3 or 4 days just by myself. I figured I'd go there and go to the grocery, get some stuff to eat, and maybe see if I could find a inexpensive cabin or something that I could stay in just to be close to Mother Nature and to see what I could see. I've heard a lot of strange occurrences happen in the Appalachian Mountains, so I thought I would go there and just see for myself if I could see anything strange. So I get there and I get checked in. The first night I stayed at a lodge. They had a really nice lake, so I went down by the lake and I sat on a bench for a while, just looking at the lake and watching some people fish. Well, I noticed there was a flock of crows, probably about a half a mile across the lake, off to my left. Looked like there was at least 50 of them, and they were making all kinds of ruckus. Looked like they were chasing something that was on the ground. Well, I watched them for about an hour, and I watched them, travel quite a ways to the right, and like I said, it was across the lake. They were going at a pretty slow speed, but they all looked like they were chasing something. It looked really weird to me. I couldn't understand what was going on. Well, I went back in and I got something to eat, and I came back later on that evening, and the crows had all moved further to the right side, coming closer to where I was at. And I just thought that was just, really odd, really peculiar. Well, later that night, I was still in the lodge. I kind of walked out on the deck, watched some deer that was in the lawn, like between me and the lake, and nothing really peculiar, but I did kind of feel something wasn't quite normal. Well, the next day came around, and I pretty much did the same thing, went and sat by the bench, saw the crows again, and they were just kind of circling around doing the same thing. It was really odd. Well, later that night, I was inside the cabin. I made something to eat. Well, I walked out of the porch of the cabin, and it was about 8:30 at night, but it was a Sunday night, and there was literally no lights on anywhere. There was nobody at the campground, nobody at the lodge. I just was standing on the deck, kind of just looking around, and I just kind of felt a little uneasy. And then I heard something rustling over to the right of me, about 40 yards to my right. And it was a little bit downhill, and it sounded like somebody ran through the leaves. I thought, maybe it's some squirrels, maybe it's some small animal, deer or something. Well, then I stood there for a few more minutes, and then there was a few oak trees about 40 yards pretty much right in front of me, a little bit to my right. Then out of nowhere, this face starts poking its head from behind this tree. And I was not expecting anything like that. I was expecting maybe to see a deer or some squirrels run out from, whatever was rustling in the leaves. It slowly moved its head out from behind this tree. And it was a pretty big head. It was huge, whatever it was. At that very second, I knew it was something that I had never seen before. I was pretty terrified. I thought, what in the world could be doing this at 8:30 on a Sunday night? I think it was during the school year, so it wasn't some kids screwing around. Nobody was at the lodge. I couldn't imagine what in the world would be doing that. Then I kind of thought back to what those crows were doing. I thought, I wonder if this got anything to do with that, because I kind of thought that they could be chasing something strange. For some reason, I thought maybe they're chasing a Bigfoot or something. I didn't know. Well, it stuck its head out a little further, and I saw ears. My first impression was a giant hyena. I was in shock. I wouldn't say I felt really anything right off the bat. It kept its head out there, and I thought, I'm seeing things. And when I started thinking like that, it stuck its head out a little further and then kind of moved its head back. I thought, okay, I'm not seeing things. This is really going on. Well, it stuck its head back a little further, and then I was pretty interested in what it was, and I thought, well, maybe it's somebody in a mask. But, who's going to do that on a Sunday night, in the middle of nowhere, and there was nobody around. And then I thought, no, this is too creepy. And I said, well, I started trying to make contact with it. I said, how you doing? I said, my name's Jason. What's your name? And it didn't say anything. And it just kind of stayed there. And then it kind of started moving its head back behind the tree. And at this point, I was thinking, this isn't good, because if it's not going to respond to me, I might need to get in the house. Well, I wasn't ready to go back in yet. So then I tried again. I started trying to talk to it, and its head came further back out. The look on its face, I've never actually seen anything that has scared me just by the look of it. And I didn't get a great look at it, but I got a close enough look at it to where it looked like a giant hyena. The tree, I should have measured it to see exactly how high it was, but it wasn't 2 or 3 foot from the ground. It was up there. If I had to guess, between 7 and 10 foot. I'm not really sure, but it wasn't on 4 legs. It was on 2. I just got to look at it for a second, and the look of it kind of just rubbed me the wrong way, and I thought, whoa. And then all of a sudden, for some reason in my mind, I was picturing somebody with a gun. And then I looked at it again, then it hit me, and I've never felt like this ever in my life. It's an impending doom that I thought, okay, if I go out there, it's going to be really, really bad. Maybe I was just scared of what I was looking at, but I got so scared. I still was trying to talk to it, but at this point I was like, it's probably better if I just go in the house. I stayed out there for a few more seconds, then I went back in the cabin. I turned every light on the cabin on. I just sat there and I went in and I watched TV for a while, but the whole time I just kept thinking, something's out. I knew something was watching me. I knew something was out there. And well, let me back up a little bit. Before I came back in, the few seconds before I came back up on the porch, I quickly turned to my left, and I felt something staring at me from the left-hand side. So I thought, wait a minute, this guy's coming around the backside. I said, something's coming around the backside. This isn't some type of game here. So there's something over there. And I didn't see anything over there, but I felt it. I just knew there was something over there. And I felt it. Something could come running at me right now. And, there'd be actually nobody around to do anything because the place was totally deserted. So I got back in the house, locked the doors, and didn't sleep. I stayed up till probably this happened at between 8 and 9 o'clock. Like I said, the whole place was deserted. There wasn't anybody there. It got to be about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I fell asleep for about a half hour. Well, I woke up. So I was really wondering what was going on. So I went back out there, and I didn't see anything. The whole scene felt a little bit different, like there wasn't any danger. But, I didn't know that for sure. I just was like, I'm really curious about this. So I walked out there, and I walked behind where the tree was, and I looked behind there, kind of just looked around. I stayed in that spot for a few minutes. Believe it or not, I tried to make contact with it, whatever it was. I'm a pretty big guy, and it was probably a really stupid move because, you really never know what the heck you're dealing with. I stayed out there and tried to make contact with it, and there was nothing. About that time, it was about 5:30, and some fishermen were coming in with their boats. So I just came back in the cabin. That was about it. Then I left the next day and came back home. But it was the weirdest experience that I've ever felt, because it literally felt like I wasn't even on Earth when that happened. It felt like I was in a totally different place, and I just felt like it was me and whatever that was. I'm curious. I'm not saying I would want to hurt one of them, or I would let any of them hurt me, but I'm very, very interested in the subject.
Well, I can understand why. It's a fascinating topic. When you first noticed that murder of crows, you said they were across the lake from you, following something. How far were they from you, though, over there?
About a quarter of a mile. It was across the lake, and like I said, they were traveling real slow, and it looked like they were following something.
Yeah, that's not that far. Did whatever the crows were following seem to be making its way in around the lake in as direct of a path as possible towards you?
Yes.
It's a very good chance it was that dogman they were following then. If it wanted to get from the ground level up to where you were sitting, were there stairs that could have come up, or do you have to go through the cabin to get up to where you're sitting out that night?
Well, I was on the deck. It would have had to walk up a hill, so I was on the top of the hill, so I had a sight advantage, but like I said, I wasn't going to let it get too close to me. But later on that night, probably a dumb move, but I walked out there and, to see what it was. I didn't have a gun on me, but I had a sword that I had in my trunk, and I went and got it out that I had bought just for a souvenir piece. I did have that on me. Like I said, I didn't hear or see anything else after that.
Well, thank goodness you didn't. Do you have any regrets about going down there trying to make contact with it?
Yes, I think it was pretty irresponsible. I didn't have enough information about what was going on, what it was. I think I was probably a little bit too friendly with the situation, that I don't know what it could have been, especially with the way all those crows were acting. Usually birds are pretty smart, and like I said, there was 40, 50, 60 of them. I believe whatever I made contact with, they were chasing, and they were hovering around there. I don't know what they could have been doing that for, possibly warning people. I'm not really sure, but yeah, it was pretty irresponsible and pretty stupid.
Crows will do that. If there's a big predator in the woods, they'll follow that predator and make all kinds of noise to alert their buddies and pretty much anything else that's got an ear out. So that does fit, but as far as going down there trying to make contact, you sure are a cool, calm, customary guy. You don't frighten easily, do you?
No, but that can be good and bad. Fear is nature's way of kind of keeping us safe a lot of times, and if you feel like there could be danger, more than likely there is. I think I was just caught up in the moment and thought, well, I might get to make contact with something different. But at the same time, I didn't know enough about the situation, and I didn't even know what it was till after I started listening to you, and I kind of put it together, especially when I saw the different types. To me, it looked like some type of giant hyena. Now, what it really was, I'm not really sure, but that's what it looked like to me. And making friends with a giant hyena is probably not the smartest thing in the world to do if you don't know anything else about it, and if you're not properly armed or have any type of backup.
Well, no harm, no foul. You just didn't know it was a dogman. So you let your instincts take over. I agree, if it was a giant hyena, there are healthier things to do than to try and make friends with it, but let's let bygones be bygones. Nothing happened that is all that bad, so we'll just count our blessings. Could you tell if it had any expression on its face when it was staring at you from behind that tree?
I saw some expression. At first, I really couldn't see any, but then I kind of saw, I really couldn't say, but it just kind of creepy. The whole situation was different. I don't want to offend any beings that were decent, but for me, it's just so far out of the realm of normal. It's just, you see a wolf standing on its hind legs. That's creepy enough. It's something you just don't see every day. I just got caught up in the moment.
Yeah, sounds like you did. You said that it reminded you of a giant hyena. What anatomical features made it look like a giant hyena to you?
Well, it was the ears, the way the ears stuck up. It seemed like it, a hyena and a wolf, they have some similar traits, but the ears were a little bit bigger, and the face and the muzzle of it, within the eyes, it just had that kind of look to it. It looked like it had a snout. I wouldn't say real short or real long, just about like a hyena would have. It just, for some reason, that's the first thing I thought of. Like I said, it was pretty reckless. I should have stayed up on the porch, but it is what it is. Thank God, I didn't get hurt. Like I said, I've got 3 kids and a bunch of grandkids. I'd like to stay around to be able to live my life with them.
Well, yeah, thank goodness you weren't hurt. I agree. You said that its ears mostly are what reminded you of it being a giant hyena. How would you describe its ears?
Bigger and a little bit wider than a wolf, maybe. That's the first thing that I saw. Now, I could have been wrong if I'd have had a closer view of it. I wish I'd have had some night vision goggles at that point, because I would have really loved to see what I was looking at. I've heard so many things about the woods in the Appalachian Mountains, and there's some places that just, if you go, you better have a group of people and you better know what you're doing, because there is a lot of woods there that people just don't go in. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of miles. Plus, those mountains, a lot of them, they've been mined, and they say there's hundreds of miles of mines through there, not to mention what other type of cavities could be inside of these mountains. We just really don't know how much space is on the inside of this planet, or how many places inside the planet could possibly be hollow. I'd say there's probably several caverns inside of this place that are absolutely humongous, and there's a lot going on inside the planet that we just have taken for granted that's not there, but it is.
That's a good point. You never know what might be out there, including dogmen. If you've had a dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest on one of my 2 Bigfoot shows, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let me know. When you tried to introduce yourself to it, Jason, you said it didn't respond to you, but did it ever make any movements?
Just back and forth, putting its head out and then kind of leaning out further past the tree and then putting its head back. That's the only movements that it made. That started to creep me out when I tried to make contact with it, and then it kind of started hiding its head, and I figured it was probably time for me to go in.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea to me. How much light was on it as it was standing there looking at you?
Not much. The lights that I had inside the cabin, and that was about it. Like I said, there was not much light going on out there. There wasn't anybody else, it seemed, at that whole lodge, and it was a pretty big place. And like I said, it's really, really deep in the mountains. Didn't look like there was probably many people that went there to begin with, because it was so deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It was not many people go there, I'd say.
It sure sounds like it. What kind of markings did it have? Could you see any?
No, I couldn't see any markings at all. Like I said, the only thing that I saw was his head come out from behind the tree, and I've never seen anything like that. I couldn't think of any animal that would actually do that. Maybe a wolf, but, of course, there's no wolves in the Appalachian Mountains that I know of.
I don't think there are any. Did you get any sleep that night?
Very little. About a half an hour.
I'm surprised you got that much. The cabin was deserted, you said, but if you would have yelled out for help that night when you first saw it, do you think any neighbors would have been close enough to hear you?
I don't think so. I think the only people that were even there was probably a night worker at the actual lodge, but I was about probably 100 to 150 yards away from that, so I probably wouldn't have got any help, no.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you would have. You've had several nightmares about dogmen over the years due to that encounter, but one stands out above the rest in your mind. Please tell us about it.
I had a nightmare, and this was actually before that happened. I had a nightmare that I was, it was the 1800s, I guess, 17 or 1800s, and I was living somewhere on a prairie, and I was in the upper floor of a cabin, something like a Little House on the Prairie or something. That's actually what it looked like in my dream. But I was on the second floor, and our home was getting invaded by werewolves. And I remember I was just a kid. I looked out the window, and I could see them starting to move around the cabin. And one of them had to be 11, 12, 13 foot tall. The head of it was almost to the second floor window. And I usually don't get that scared in my dreams, but I was absolutely terrified. When I woke up, I was just really, really happy that it was just a dream. Ever since I watched the Howling movie as a kid, I've had some reoccurring nightmares about werewolves, and it's never been fun.
Yeah, they normally aren't. And speaking of the howling, you started watching a TV series that's related to your encounter after you had it. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, I actually found an old series called Werewolf that was an 80s series. And it went for a couple seasons, I think, and it was actually a really good series. It was one of the better ones, in my opinion. The storyline and the main character, he's just a really good guy with a lot of good morals, and he just went on an adventure while he was trying to outrun this bounty hunter, and that was a really good series. There's one more account that I can remember. When I was in high school, I had a friend of mine that his dad owned a farm in Indiana. They told us one night that his grandpa had saw a werewolf on his farm. He said that just out of nowhere, this werewolf walks out of the woods and walks back behind their barn, and it just totally freaked the whole family out. And the family was really, really terrified of the whole subject since then. And that's one of the things that really, really interested me. But, it's like I said, it's just, I've never seen the whole body of one. But, what I went through was pretty terrifying. Like I said, not at first, but after the shock wore off, I knew that I had to get back in that cabin.
Well, so that I'm glad you never saw the whole body on that Dogman. Did watching Werewolf help you or hurt you in the long run when it comes to dealing with your encounter?
I think it helped me some, but it really just gave me more questions. Because, like I said, I don't believe in the werewolf where it's a transformation. I believe that there are actually, whether they're called lichens or dogmen, I'd say that those are real creatures that actually exist.
Yeah, Werewolf was a really good series. I can still remember rushing home from work on Friday nights to be able to watch new episodes of that. Yeah, that was a really good show. You told me the first time we spoke that going into the woods has changed your perspective on life. Please talk us through that.
Well, it made me realize there was more out there than just bears and wolves and bobcats. And I kind of, like I said, I've always kind of thought there was cryptids. I just didn't think there was any this close to home. Yeah, it changed my perspective. I'm not going camping in the woods by myself, and I wouldn't take my family out in the middle of the woods either anymore. And that's kind of taken something, for me and everybody else. But at the same time, we've shared this world with a lot of different type of beings for, I guess, a long time. Like I said, some of them maybe for a long time, some of them not so long. But yeah, it changed my perspective. It made me a lot more careful when I think about wanting to go for hikes and stuff. I wouldn't go unless I was armed, and I definitely wouldn't go in there alone, maybe without a dog and some people.
For a lot of reasons, that's a good idea. There are a lot of things out there besides dogmen to worry about. Well, it's about time for us to get out of here, Jason, but before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you do for everybody. I listen to your show every Friday, and I've listened to just about every one of your recordings, and I think what you do for people is great. I've heard all the people that you've helped, and I just think you're a saint when it comes to this. There's so many people that are scared and terrified and don't understand, and you've helped them give some of their life back, and you've helped them feeling not alone has really helped them, and it's really, really impressive, Vic, and thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thanks for saying that. I just feel so lucky to be in a position to be able to help. Wouldn't have it any other way. But having said that, thanks so much for coming on and sharing the details of that experience with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vic. You're welcome.
Thanks again so much. Have a great night.